Everyone feared the arrogant millionaire's wife, until an 8-year-old paralyzed girl made her look ridiculous. What she did next will make you cry. Where in the world are you following this case from? Comment below, hit like, and subscribe for more shocking and emotional crime stories. The sharp clatter of expensive heels announced Victoria Hamilton's arrival at Luminous, Boston's most exclusive restaurant. Conversations hushed as she strode toward her usual corner table, a walking storm in a designer dress. The maitre d' practically tripped over himself to pull out her chair. "Mrs. Hamilton, lovely to see you again," he said, sweat beading on his forehead. Victoria barely acknowledged him with a glance. "The tablecloth has a wrinkle. Fix it." At 43, Victoria wore her beauty like armor and her wealth like a weapon. Her husband, tech magnate Carter Hamilton, had amassed billions, but it was Victoria who wielded the family's social influence with surgical precision. "I'll replace it immediately," the maitre d' stammered, signaling frantically to his staff. 3 tables away, Sarah Miller watched while her husband David helped their daughter Emily into her wheelchair. They rarely splurged on fine dining, but today was special. Emily had just won her school's science competition, despite being the youngest entrant. "Mom, why is everyone so quiet?" Emily whispered, her intelligent eyes missing nothing. Sarah leaned close. "That's Mrs. Hamilton. She owns half the buildings downtown." "She doesn't own the air we breathe," Emily replied with an 8-year-old's simple wisdom. The restaurant staff scrambled around Victoria, replacing the tablecloth, bringing fresh flowers, adjusting the lighting to her preference. One young server's hand trembled so badly that water sloshed over the rim of Victoria's glass. "Incompetent," Victoria muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Is this what passes for service now?" The server, a college student named Zoe, blinked back tears. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Hamilton. I'll get you a fresh—" "Don't bother," Victoria cut her off. "Just send someone competent to take my order." At the Miller table, Emily's face flushed with indignation. 3 years in a wheelchair had taught her about dignity and kindness, lessons the wealthy woman clearly needed. "That's not right," Emily murmured. David touched her hand. "Sometimes people with money forget their manners, sweetheart." But Emily wasn't listening anymore. She was calculating, her gifted mind turning over possibilities. When Victoria's phone rang and she stepped away from her table, Emily saw her opportunity. "I need to use the restroom," she announced. Sarah looked concerned. "Want me to take you?" "No thanks, Mom. I can do it." Emily's voice carried the determination that had become her hallmark since the accident. As Emily wheeled herself across the restaurant, Victoria paced near the entrance, barking instructions into her phone about some charity gala. Emily positioned her wheelchair directly in the path Victoria would take back to her table and waited. When Victoria turned, ending her call, she nearly collided with Emily's chair. "What on earth?" Victoria looked down, irritation flashing across her perfect features. "Child, move aside." Emily looked up, her clear eyes unblinking. "My name is Emily, not Child. And you made that server cry." Victoria's perfectly arched eyebrows shot up. "Excuse me?" "You have beautiful clothes and jewelry," Emily continued calmly. "But you weren't being beautiful on the inside. My mom says that's the part that matters." The restaurant had gone silent again. Victoria Hamilton, who could silence boardrooms with a glance, found herself speechless before an 8-year-old in a wheelchair. "You don't know who I am," Victoria finally managed. Emily smiled. "I do. You're someone who can afford anything except being nice." A muffled laugh came from somewhere in the restaurant, quickly stifled. Victoria's face flushed crimson, and for a moment her carefully constructed facade cracked. Something flickered in her eyes, not anger, but something deeper and more painful. Then her phone rang again. Victoria glanced at the screen and something changed in her expression. "I have to take this," she said, but her voice had lost its edge. As Victoria walked away, Emily wheeled back to her parents, unaware that she had just catalyzed a chain of events that would change multiple lives forever. Behind her, Victoria Hamilton pressed her phone to her ear, her hand shaking. "Yes, doctor," she said quietly. "I'll come immediately." Emily Miller hadn't always been in a wheelchair. 3 years earlier, she had been a typical 5-year-old, dancing through life on sturdy legs. That changed on a rainy Tuesday when a delivery truck skidded through a red light, T-boning the family sedan. Sarah had been driving. David was at work. Emily had been singing in her booster seat. The doctors had explained that the spinal cord injury was incomplete. Emily retained some sensation, but not enough motor function to walk unassisted. She might regain more function with time and therapy, they'd said with careful optimism that dwindled as months passed. What the accident couldn't touch was Emily's mind. As physical therapy became her new normal, Emily dove into books, mathematics and music with an intensity that startled her teachers. By age 6, she was reading at a high school level. By 7, she had taught herself basic coding. Now at 8, she had just won a science competition against middle schoolers with her project on adaptive technologies. "I made something that helps people like me," she'd explained to the judges, "because sometimes our brains know exactly what to do, but our bodies can't follow instructions." The morning after the restaurant incident, Emily sat at the kitchen table working on advanced math problems while Sarah prepared breakfast. Their modest apartment in Cambridge was cramped but warm, filled with books and adaptive equipment. "Do you think I was rude yesterday?" Emily asked suddenly. Sarah cracked an egg into the sizzling pan. "You spoke the truth, honey. Sometimes that's uncomfortable for people who aren't used to hearing it. Dad says I should be more careful around powerful people. Your father worries." Sarah flipped the egg. "He doesn't want anything else to happen to you." David entered the kitchen, straightening his tie. As a high school physics teacher, he couldn't afford to be late. "What's this about me?" "Emily's wondering if she should have kept quiet yesterday," Sarah explained. David bent to kiss Emily's head. "Standing up for others is always right, Emmy. I just get nervous about rich folks with grudges." The family lived in a constant state of financial tightrope walking. Insurance covered some of Emily's medical expenses, but the specialized treatments and equipment had depleted their savings. Sarah had left her nursing career to care for Emily full-time, leaving David's teacher salary as their primary income. Mrs. Hamilton looked sad, Emily said thoughtfully, not angry. Something else was bothering her. "Empathy is your superpower," Sarah smiled. After breakfast, Emily had her weekly session with Dr. Kaufman, the neuropsychologist who had been monitoring her cognitive development since the accident. "Your test scores are extraordinary, Emily," Dr. Kaufman said. "Your mathematical reasoning is off the charts, and your emotional intelligence scores are equally impressive." "Does that mean I'm getting better?" Emily asked. The question weighted with hope. Dr. Kaufman's expression softened. "Your brain is magnificent. As for your body, that's Dr. Peterson's department." On their way out of the hospital, Sarah and Emily passed through the atrium where a grand piano sat. Emily always paused here, watching if anyone was playing. "Can I try?" she asked, as she did every week. Sarah checked her watch. A few minutes. Emily wheeled herself to the piano. Though her legs didn't work as they should, her fingers remained nimble and precise. She positioned her chair and began to play Debussy's Clair de Lune, a piece far beyond the capabilities of most children twice her age. People stopped to listen, forming a small semicircle around the piano. Emily played with her eyes closed, swaying slightly. Transported by the music she created, she didn't notice the elegant woman who froze at the edge of the atrium, recognition flashing across her face. Victoria Hamilton stood motionless, clutching a manila envelope of medical records, watching the small girl whose words had pierced her facade just the day before. As the final notes faded, applause erupted around Emily. She opened her eyes, smiling shyly at her audience, and locked gazes with Victoria Hamilton. Recognition dawned on Emily's face, followed by curiosity. Victoria took an involuntary step forward, then stopped as a hospital intercom paged, "Mrs. Hamilton to oncology, 6th floor." Victoria turned away quickly, heading toward the elevators, but not before Emily caught the glint of tears in the woman's eyes. "Mom," Emily whispered, "Mrs. Hamilton is here, and she's crying." "Hospitals make everyone human, sweetheart," Sarah replied, not realizing the significance of the encounter. "Even people like her." Carter Hamilton was accustomed to his wife's moods, but something had shifted in Victoria since her hospital visit 3 days ago. She moved through their Beacon Hill mansion like a ghost. "Vicky, are you listening?" Carter asked over breakfast, his Wall Street Journal lowered to reveal his still handsome face at 50. Victoria blinked, returning from wherever her mind had wandered. "Sorry, what were you saying?" "The Adams Foundation Gala. It's this weekend, and you haven't confirmed the guest list." "I'll handle it today," she promised, though her voice lacked its usual efficiency. Carter studied his wife with a mixture of concern and frustration. Their marriage had never been passionate, but it had been a successful partnership. He provided the fortune through his tech empire. She provided the social status through her family name and impeccable networking skills. What most of Boston didn't know was that the infamous Victoria Hamilton had once been Victoria Cabot, a scholarship student at Radcliffe with dreams of becoming a concert pianist. Her working-class background was a carefully guarded secret, as was the music scholarship that had been her ticket out of poverty. She had met Carter at a university function where she was performing. He was already successful, 15 years her senior, and smitten by the beautiful pianist with perfect posture and ambitious eyes. Their courtship had been brief and practical. Victoria saw in Carter financial security. Carter saw in Victoria the perfect corporate wife. For the first 5 years, the arrangement worked flawlessly. Victoria abandoned her musical aspirations without apparent regret, channeling her discipline into becoming Boston's most formidable socialite instead. Then came the pregnancy. Unplanned but not unwelcome, it had softened something in both of them. Victoria spent months preparing a nursery, selecting a piano for their child's future lessons, humming lullabies as she sorted tiny clothes. She was 7 months along when the cramping started. By morning, their daughter was gone. Stillborn. Perfect in every way except for the silence where a heartbeat should have been. They named her Lily. Buried her in the Hamilton family plot. Closed the nursery door. Victoria never played the piano again. The doctors delivered another blow weeks later. Scarring from the complicated delivery meant Victoria couldn't have more children. Carter suggested adoption, but Victoria refused. She returned to society events within a month, her designer clothes concealing her still-healing body, her smile masking devastating grief. If she was colder afterward, more demanding, more critical, well, Boston's elite simply assumed that was her nature. No one connected the sharp-tongued Mrs. Hamilton with the young pianist who had lost her child and her dreams in one cruel stroke. "Victoria," Carter said now, reaching across the breakfast table to touch her hand. "What did the doctor say?" She withdrew her hand smoothly. "Nothing conclusive. More tests next week." The mammogram had revealed a shadow. Probably nothing, the doctor had said, but with her family history, they needed to be thorough. Victoria hadn't told Carter about the follow-up appointment or the biopsy scheduled for Monday. "I'm meeting with the Children's Hospital Board at noon," Victoria said, changing the subject. "The new wing funding is still short." Carter nodded, recognizing the deflection but accepting it. Their marriage had survived on such tacit agreements. Don't press too hard. Don't feel too much. Don't disrupt the carefully choreographed dance of their lives. I can transfer additional funds, he offered. It's a worthy cause. Victoria nodded absently, her thoughts returning to the small girl at the piano in the hospital atrium. The girl from the restaurant who had spoken truth without fear. The girl whose music had momentarily transported Victoria back to a time when she too had found solace in Debussy's melodies. I'm considering taking a more active role in the hospital's music therapy program, she said suddenly. Carter looked up in surprise. Victoria hadn't shown interest in music since Lily's death 7 years ago. That's unexpected, he replied carefully. Victoria straightened her already perfect posture. The foundation needs a new focus area. Music therapy for children with disabilities has proven benefits. It was the kind of practical justification Carter understood. He nodded approvingly, unaware that for the first time in years his wife had made a decision, based not on social calculation, but on the haunting memory of a paralyzed child playing Clair de Lune with more feeling than Victoria had allowed herself to experience in 7 years. "Mrs. Hamilton to see you, Dr. Peterson." The neurologist looked up from Emily's file, surprise evident on his tired face. "Send her in." Victoria entered with her usual confidence, though her heartbeat betrayed her nervousness. She had spent the morning in the Children's Hospital board meeting, half listening to budget discussions while calculating how to engineer this particular encounter. "Mrs. Hamilton, this is unexpected," Dr. Peterson said, rising to shake her hand. "I'm taking a special interest in certain hospital programs," Victoria replied smoothly, "particularly those involving pediatric spinal injuries and rehabilitation therapies." Dr. Peterson's eyebrows rose. "I wasn't aware you had a personal connection to this field." "I don't." The lie came easily after years of practice. "But as the hospital's largest private donor, I believe I should understand where the money goes." She gestured to the file on his desk. "Is that the Miller case? I observed her playing piano in the atrium. Remarkable talent." Dr. Peterson hesitated, ethical concerns evident in his expression. "Patient information is confidential, Mrs. Hamilton." "Of course." Victoria waved dismissively. "I'm not asking for medical details. I'm inquiring about music therapy applications. My foundation is considering a substantial donation." The mention of funding relaxed the doctor's professional guard. Hospital departments lived and died by donations, and Victoria knew exactly how to leverage this reality. "Emily Miller is extraordinary," Dr. Peterson admitted. "Her cognitive abilities test off the charts, and she's maintained remarkable dexterity in her upper body. The piano playing is actually excellent physical therapy for her." "And her prognosis?" Victoria asked, careful to keep her voice professionally detached. Dr. Peterson sighed. "With her type of incomplete spinal cord injury, there's always hope for improvement. But the family's insurance has limited coverage for the more intensive therapies. They're doing the best they can with their resources." Victoria nodded, filing away this information. "I understand she'll be in physical therapy this afternoon?" "At 3, Dr. Peterson confirmed, then added cautiously, "But treatment sessions aren't typically open to observers." Victoria stood, smoothing her immaculate suit. "I'll speak with the department head. Thank you for your time, Doctor." 30 minutes and several strategic phone calls later, Victoria sat quietly in the corner of the pediatric physical therapy room, ostensibly there to evaluate the department for potential funding. When Emily wheeled into the room at precisely 3 o'clock, she spotted Victoria immediately. Recognition flashed across her young face, followed by undisguised curiosity. "Mrs. Hamilton," Emily said, wheeling closer, "are you sick too?" The directness of the question momentarily disarmed Victoria. "No, I'm observing the department for funding purposes." Emily nodded seriously. They need better equipment, especially the walking harnesses. The one they have is too big for kids my size. Victoria found herself taking mental notes. Is that so? Emily is our resident equipment expert, the physical therapist interjected nervously. She's designed several adaptive modifications herself. Victoria watched as Emily transferred from her wheelchair to the therapy mat with practiced movements. Despite the limitations of her lower body, her upper body strength was impressive. The session proceeded with various exercises. Victoria observed how Emily pushed through discomfort without complaint, her determination evident in the set of her jaw, so like Victoria's own expression when facing challenges. Halfway through the session, Emily's legs spasmed unexpectedly. Pain flashed across her face before she could mask it. Muscle spasm, the therapist explained quietly to Victoria. They can be quite painful. Victoria's hand moved involuntarily to her stomach, where phantom pain from her own loss sometimes still flared. After the session, as Emily returned to her wheelchair, Victoria approached her. "Your therapist tells me you're something of an inventor," she said. Emily looked up with bright, intelligent eyes. "I like solving problems. That's a useful skill." Victoria hesitated, then asked, "Is it difficult, the piano playing with your condition?" "Sometimes my back hurts if I sit too long," Emily admitted. "And I can't use the pedals, so some pieces are impossible. But mostly it's okay. Music makes me feel like I can still fly." The simple statement hit Victoria with unexpected force. When was the last time she had allowed herself to feel anything so pure? "You play beautifully," Victoria said, her voice softer than usual. "Thank you." Emily studied Victoria with unnerving perception. "You look sad today, less angry than at the restaurant, but sadder." Victoria stiffened. "I'm perfectly fine." "My mum says it's okay to not be okay sometimes," Emily continued. "That's what makes us human." Before Victoria could respond, Sarah Miller appeared at the therapy room door. Her face registered shock at seeing Victoria Hamilton in conversation with her daughter. "Emily, the van is waiting," Sarah called, her voice tight with protective concern. Emily waved. "Coming, Mum," she turned back to Victoria. "Will you be here tomorrow? I'm playing in the atrium at 11. They let me practice there sometimes." "I have a busy schedule," Victoria replied automatically. Emily nodded, not pushing further. As she wheeled away, she paused to look back. "Music helps with sadness too, Mrs. Hamilton, not just paralysis." 05. Victoria's phone rang at 5:17 a.m. The screen displayed Boston Memorial Hospital, jolting her fully awake. Hospital calls at dawn rarely brought good news. "Mrs. Hamilton speaking," she answered, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "Mrs. Hamilton, this is Dr. Rivera from pathology. I apologize for calling so early, but you requested immediate results regardless of the hour." Victoria closed her eyes, bracing herself. Beside her, Carter slept on, oblivious. "Go ahead, doctor." "The biopsy results are benign, no malignancy detected." The relief was so powerful it momentarily robbed Victoria of speech. She had been preparing for the worst since the initial mammogram showed the suspicious shadow, the same shadow that had appeared in her mother's scan 30 years ago, shortly before cancer took her. "Thank you," she finally managed. "Email me the full report." After disconnecting, Victoria slipped out of bed and into the adjoining bathroom. In the mirror, she barely recognized herself, her carefully maintained facade temporarily stripped away by the emotional whiplash of fear and relief. For a week, she had carried the possibility of cancer silently, telling no one, not even Carter. It was her way, handling problems alone, showing no weakness. But the experience had left her raw, vulnerable, in ways she hadn't allowed herself to be in years. She thought of Emily Miller, living every day with a condition far more certain than Victoria's temporary fear. The child faced her challenges with openness and even joy, playing piano, creating inventions, speaking truth to adults who intimidated everyone else. 2 hours later, Victoria sat in her Mercedes outside Cambridge Regional School, watching parents drop off their children. She had called in a favor from Dr. Peterson, learning Emily's school details under the guise of arranging a special music therapy program. At 8:17, the Miller's wheelchair-accessible van pulled up. Victoria watched as David helped Emily into her chair, then kissed her goodbye before heading to his own teaching job. Sarah accompanied Emily to the school entrance, where they were met by a teacher's aide. Victoria waited until Sarah returned to the van before approaching her. "Mrs. Miller," Victoria called, stepping out of her car. Sarah turned, confusion giving way to recognition and wariness. "Mrs. Hamilton, what are you doing here?" "I'd like to speak with you," Victoria said. "About Emily." Sarah's expression hardened. "Why are you following my daughter?" The accusation was justified, Victoria knew. Her behavior was unusual, possibly alarming from Sarah's perspective. It's not what you think," Victoria struggled uncharacteristically with words. "Could we talk somewhere? Perhaps coffee?" Sarah hesitated, suspicion warring with curiosity. "There's a cafe around the corner. I have 20 minutes before my shift at the clinic." The cafe was small and unpretentious. They ordered an Americano for Victoria, plain coffee for Sarah, and sat at a corner table. "I owe you an explanation," Victoria began. "You owe my daughter an apology," Sarah countered. "Your behavior at the restaurant was inexcusable." Victoria didn't deny it. Yes, it was. The simple admission seemed to surprise Sarah, who had clearly expected defensiveness. "Emily has a gift," Victoria continued. "Her music, her mind. They're extraordinary." "We know that," Sarah said, protective maternal pride evident in her voice. "What's your interest in her?" Victoria looked down at her untouched coffee. How could she explain what she herself didn't fully understand? That seeing Emily play had awakened something she thought had died with her daughter. "I want to help," she said finally. "I've learned about the limitations of Emily's therapy coverage. I have connections, resources that could make a difference." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "We don't need charity, Mrs. Hamilton." "It's not charity," Victoria said quickly. "It's investment in exceptional talent." "So you want to use my daughter for some pet project? Another charity case to boost your social standing?" The accusation stung, particularly because months ago it might have been true. Victoria had built her reputation on strategic philanthropy, causes chosen for maximum social impact rather than personal conviction. "You misunderstand me," Victoria said, her own voice cooling. "I'm offering access to experimental therapies not covered by insurance, equipment customized to Emily's specifications, musical training with instructors who could nurture her talent." Sarah's expression remained skeptical. "Why? A week ago you were making servers cry. Now suddenly you're interested in my daughter's welfare. What changed?" "Everything," Victoria wanted to say. "I learned I don't have cancer. I realized I've been paralyzed in my own way for 7 years. Instead," she said, "I lost a daughter." The words hung between them, raw and unplanned. Victoria hadn't meant to reveal this, her most closely guarded pain, to a stranger. "I'm sorry for your loss," Sarah said, her expression softening slightly. "But Emily isn't a replacement." "I know that," Victoria interrupted. "She's her own person, remarkable in her own right." She paused, then continued with difficult honesty. "She reminded me of who I used to be, before." Sarah studied Victoria, reassessing her. "Emily mentioned you were at her therapy session. She said you seemed sad." "She's perceptive." "Too perceptive sometimes," Sarah agreed with a small smile. "Look, Mrs. Hamilton, Victoria, please." "Victoria, I appreciate the offer, but we're careful about Emily's care. Her condition is stable. We've adjusted to our circumstances. Victoria recognized the pride in Sarah's voice, the same pride she herself had always taken in handling difficulties without assistance. But this wasn't about charity or pity. It was about redemption, perhaps. "I understand," Victoria said, "but would you at least consider allowing Emily to use the grand piano at my home? It's a Steinway concert grand, better than the hospital atrium piano. She could practice without time limitations." Sarah hesitated, clearly torn between suspicion of Victoria's motives and desire for her daughter's happiness. "Emily mentioned you'll be at the hospital at 11 today," Victoria continued, "for her atrium practice session. I'll be there as well. Perhaps we could discuss this further then, all three of us." After a moment, Sarah nodded cautiously. "I'll think about it, but I make no promises." As they parted outside the cafe, Victoria felt strangely lightheaded. The conversation had gone nothing like her usual carefully orchestrated social interactions. She had been vulnerable, honest in ways she hadn't allowed herself to be in years. At precisely 10:52 a.m., Victoria entered the hospital atrium. She had exchanged her casual morning outfit for a more typical designer suit, armor reinstated for a public appearance. She positioned herself near a large potted plant, partially concealed but with a clear view of the grand piano. At 11, Emily wheeled into the atrium, Sarah following close behind. Victoria watched as they approached the piano, noticing how Emily's face lit up at the sight of the instrument, the same expression Victoria herself had once worn when approaching a keyboard. Emily positioned her wheelchair and adjusted the bench height, then began to play Bach's Prelude in C major, the piece Victoria had used for her own Juilliard audition 25 years earlier. The coincidence was so startling that Victoria stepped forward involuntarily. Sarah noticed her first, nudging Emily, who completed the phrase she was playing before looking up. "Mrs. Hamilton," Emily called, her face brightening. "You came!" The genuine pleasure in the child's voice was disarming. Victoria approached the piano, nodding politely to Sarah before addressing Emily. "Bach's Prelude," she observed. "A challenging piece." "It's like mathematics," Emily replied, "all the patterns fitting together perfectly." Victoria found herself smiling, a real smile, not the practiced social expression she usually wore. "Yes, exactly. Bach understood the mathematics of emotion." Emily's eyes widened. "You play too?" Before Victoria could answer, Sarah interjected, "Mrs. Hamilton has offered to let you practice on her piano at home, a better instrument than this one." "Really?" Emily looked between the adults, excitement building. "A real grand piano?" "A Steinway concert grand," Victoria confirmed. "It hasn't been played in some time, but it's maintained regularly." She didn't add that the piano had been purchased for Lily, part of the future Victoria had planned for a daughter who never had the chance to touch its keys. "Would you play something else first?" Victoria asked. "Here, I mean." Emily nodded eagerly. "Any requests?" Victoria hesitated only briefly. "Debussy?" "Clair de Lune, perhaps." As Emily began to play, Victoria closed her eyes momentarily, letting the familiar melody wash over her. When she opened them, she found Sarah watching her with a thoughtful expression. "You understand music," Sarah said quietly, as Emily continued playing. "I used to," Victoria admitted, "a lifetime ago." When Emily finished, the small crowd that had gathered applauded. Victoria joined them, noting the flush of pleasure on Emily's cheeks, the natural response of an artist appreciating audience connection. "That was lovely," Victoria said. She glanced at Sarah. "Have you considered what we discussed this morning?" Sarah's expression remained cautious but had softened. "Emily has physical therapy on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We could potentially arrange for piano time on Wednesday afternoons." "My schedule is flexible," Victoria replied, though this was far from true. Emily looked between them. "Is this like regular lessons?" Because I already have a teacher at school. Not lessons, Victoria clarified, just practice time on a professional instrument, though I could arrange for masterclasses if you're interested. What's a masterclass? Emily asked. It's when a professional musician works with promising students, Victoria explained. I know several Juilliard professors who visit Boston regularly. Could I see the piano before deciding? Emily asked. I've never played a real concert grand before. The request filled Victoria with unexpected anxiety. Inviting the Millers to her home meant opening doors that had been firmly shut for years. Perhaps next week, Victoria hedged. I'll need to make arrangements. Emily's face fell slightly, though she tried to hide her disappointment. Victoria recognized the expression, the careful masking of feelings that children learn when adults disappoint them. She had seen it in the mirror often enough during her own childhood. Actually, Victoria found herself saying, tomorrow would work, after school, say 4 o'clock. Emily's smile returned full force. Really? Mom, can we? Sarah hesitated, clearly weighing concerns about this strange new connection. I suppose we could. David has a late faculty meeting tomorrow anyway. Indeed, as they finalized details, Victoria felt a strange lightness she hadn't experienced in years. The carefully structured walls of her life were developing cracks. Through those cracks, something new was growing, something frightening and potentially painful, but also possibly healing. Tomorrow, Emily Miller would play the piano, meant for Lily Hamilton. The thought was both terrifying and somehow right, as if two separate timelines were finally converging into one cohesive story. The Hamilton estate occupied nearly 2 acres of prime Beacon Hill real estate. As Sarah guided their van through the imposing entrance at precisely 4 o'clock, Emily pressed her face against the window, eyes wide. It's like a castle, she whispered. Sarah squeezed the steering wheel tightly. Remember, we're just here to see the piano. Don't get too attached to any of this. Victoria herself greeted them at the door rather than the butler Sarah had half expected. She wore simple black pants and a cashmere sweater, still clearly expensive but less intimidating than her usual armor-like suits. Welcome, Victoria said, her professional smile softening as she bent slightly toward Emily's wheelchair. I hope the drive wasn't difficult. Your house is amazing, Emily replied. Does it have an elevator? Victoria nodded. Yes, Carter installed it when we renovated. The music room is on the 2nd floor. The elevator carried them upstairs, where Victoria hesitated briefly before a set of double doors. Something in her posture changed, a tightening of her shoulders, a momentary falter in her perfect composure. The music room, she said finally, pushing the doors open. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating a space designed with acoustics in mind. At the center stood a magnificent Steinway grand piano, its polished black surface reflecting the afternoon light. Emily's breath caught audibly. It's beautiful. Victoria moved to the windows, adjusting the blinds. It's kept tuned, though no one has played it in some time. Sarah noticed other details, the small chair in the corner with what appeared to be a child-sized violin case beside it, the built-in shelves containing sheet music, the framed photograph face down on a side table. This room had been prepared for someone who never arrived. May I? Emily asked, wheeling herself toward the piano. Victoria nodded, her back still to them. Emily positioned her wheelchair carefully and began to play. First a simple scale, then arpeggios, then a Mozart sonata, her small hands stretching to accommodate the demanding passages. Victoria moved closer, watching Emily's technique. You're fingering on that passage, she said. Try using your 4th finger on the F sharp. Emily adjusted and repeated the passage. The improvement was immediately apparent. You do play, Emily said, looking up at Victoria with a triumphant smile. I knew it. Victoria's carefully composed expression wavered. I used to, a very long time ago. Do play something now, Emily urged, wheeling back from the piano. Victoria shook her head. I couldn't possibly. I haven't touched a keyboard in 7 years. Like riding a bike, Emily insisted. Your muscles remember even if your brain's forgotten. To Sarah's surprise, Victoria sat slowly on the bench. I'm terribly out of practice, she warned, positioning her hands over the keys. For a long moment, Victoria sat motionless. Then, with visible effort, she began to play Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. The beginning was hesitant, but as the piece progressed, Victoria's muscle memory seemed to take over. Her rigid posture softened, her breathing deepened, and her expression transformed from concentration to something approaching peace. When she finished, the final notes hung in the air like a question. That was beautiful, Emily said softly. Victoria looked up, tears glistening in her eyes. Before she could respond, the sound of the front door opening echoed through the house. Victoria, a male voice called. Are you home? Victoria stood quickly, composure snapping back into place. My husband. He's home earlier than expected. 2 weeks after Emily's first visit to the Hamilton estate, changes had rippled through multiple lives. Emily now spent Wednesday and Saturday afternoons practicing on Victoria's Steinway. The sessions had evolved from simple practice to impromptu lessons, as Victoria found herself increasingly drawn back into the world of music. Your phrasing needs more space to breathe, Victoria would suggest, demonstrating the passage with her own hands. Think of it as a sentence with proper punctuation. Emily proved to be an exceptional student, absorbing Victoria's guidance with an intuitive understanding that belied her 8 years. For Victoria, these afternoons became islands of authenticity in a life that had long been governed by appearances. Sarah, initially wary, had gradually relaxed as she observed the genuine connection forming between her daughter and Victoria. She now used these hours to catch up on paperwork from her nursing job or rest in the sunroom Victoria had offered. Carter, however, viewed these developments with confusion. The woman who returned downstairs after Emily's sessions was not the Victoria he had married. She was more animated, more present, more unpredictable. The Adams Foundation called again about the gala, Carter mentioned over breakfast one morning. They're still waiting for your final guest list and seating arrangements. Victoria looked up from the medical journal she'd been reading. I've decided to scale back my involvement. Janet Woodson is perfectly capable of handling the details. Carter set down his coffee cup with deliberate care. You've chaired that event for 6 years. It's expected. Perhaps it's time for new expectations, Victoria replied with a small smile. Before Carter could respond, Victoria's phone chimed with a text message. Dr. Peterson has approved Emily for the new robotic gait therapy. Insurance won't cover it, but I've arranged for the foundation to fund a pilot program. Victoria, Carter said carefully, I'm delighted you found a new philanthropic interest, but I'm concerned about your personal involvement with this particular child. It's becoming intensive. Victoria's expression cooled. Meaning? Meaning that professional boundaries exist for a reason. You're not her doctor or her mother. You're a benefactor. The word landed between them like a slap. Victoria set down her phone with deliberate care. Is that what you think I'm doing? Playing Lady Bountiful to salve my conscience? I think, Carter said gently, that you're looking for something in this child that you lost with Lily. And while that's understandable, it may not be healthy, for you or for her. Victoria stood abruptly. You have no idea what this is about. None at all. She left the room before Carter could respond, something she had never done in their years of marriage. Conflict between them had always been handled with cool civility, never raw emotion. Later that day, Victoria sat in the waiting area of Boston Children's Hospital, watching through a glass partition as Emily experienced her first session with the robotic gait trainer. The device, newly acquired with Hamilton Foundation funding, supported Emily's weight while mechanically guiding her legs through walking motions on a treadmill. "Mrs. Hamilton?" Victoria turned to find Dr. Peterson beside her. "Doctor, how would you assess today's session?" "Promising," he replied. "Emily's neurological response is excellent. With regular sessions, we might see functional improvement in 6 to 8 months." "That's actually quite rapid in medical terms," he added, seeing Victoria's frown. "Neuroplasticity is remarkable in children her age, but it still takes time." Victoria nodded, watching as Emily completed her session and returned to her wheelchair, flushed with effort but smiling. The Millers gathered around her, David kneeling to be at eye level with his daughter, Sarah adjusting the wheelchair footrests with practiced ease. Something twisted in Victoria's chest. Not quite envy, not quite longing, but a sharp awareness of what she and Carter had never built. Their marriage was a partnership of convenience, not the organic family bond she witnessed through the glass. The Boston Symphony's annual gala was the highlight of the fall social season. Victoria had attended for 15 consecutive years, the last 10 as a committee chair. Her absence was noted immediately by the city's elite as they gathered in the Symphony Hall's opulent foyer. "Victoria Hamilton sends her regrets," Janet Woodson explained to yet another inquiry. "A personal matter required her attention." The personal matter was Emily's first recital since beginning her studies with Victoria. The child was performing at a modest community music school event, sharing the stage with students of varying ages and abilities. Compared to the Symphony Gala, it was an insignificant occasion, except to Emily, for whom it represented a significant challenge conquered. Victoria sat between Sarah and David in the school's small auditorium, conscious of the curious glances her presence attracted. Her Chanel suit and Louboutin heels were conspicuously out of place among the casual attire of other parents. "Emily's nervous," Sarah whispered as they waited for the program to begin. "She's never performed her own composition before." Victoria nodded. In recent weeks, Emily had begun experimenting with composition, encouraged by Victoria's discovery of her perfect pitch and natural sense of harmonic structure. "She's well prepared," Victoria replied with quiet confidence. "Her technique is solid." David leaned forward. "It's not her playing she's worried about. It's the piece itself. She thinks it might not be good enough." Victoria understood immediately. Technical skill was objective, measurable. Creative expression was subjective, vulnerable. Emily feared judgment not of her abilities, but of her artistic voice. When Emily's turn came, she wheeled herself onto the small stage and positioned her chair at the upright piano. Victoria held her breath, suddenly nervous on the child's behalf. Emily began with Bach's 2-part invention in C major, playing with precision and clarity. Victoria could hear the results of their work together, the careful voicing, the balanced dynamics, the thoughtful phrasing. After polite applause, Emily paused, her hands hovering above the keys. "This next piece is something I wrote," she announced, her voice small but steady. "It's called After the Rain, and it's about how things can be beautiful even after they get broken." Victoria felt Sarah stiffen beside her and saw David reach for his wife's hand. The reference to Emily's accident was clear to those who knew her story. Emily began to play her composition, a simple, poignant melody in a minor key that gradually transformed, incorporating major harmonies that suggested hope without denying the initial sadness. For an 8-year-old's work, it showed remarkable emotional sophistication. Victoria found herself unexpectedly moved, her throat tightening as the piece progressed. Emily wasn't merely playing notes, she was communicating her experience of the world, the pain of her accident, and the beauty she had discovered beyond it. When Emily finished, the audience's applause was genuinely appreciative. The child's face brightened with relief and pleasure as she wheeled herself off the stage. "She's remarkable," Victoria said as they waited for Emily after the recital. That composition showed genuine talent. "Mrs. Hamilton," Emily called, wheeling toward them through the crowd. "Did you like it? Was the middle section too repetitive?" Victoria knelt to Emily's level, smiling. "It was beautiful, Emily. Structurally sound and emotionally honest. Those are rare qualities in combination." Emily beamed at the specific praise. "I was thinking maybe for my next piece I could try something with counterpoint, like Bach, but more modern." "A worthy challenge," Victoria agreed. She reached into her purse and withdrew a small velvet box. "I brought you something, a small tradition in the music world." Emily opened the box to find a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a 16th note. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "My teacher gave me one after my first composition was performed," Victoria explained. "Each time you create something new, you can add another charm." Carter was waiting in the library when Victoria returned home at nearly 11 o'clock. The room's warm wood paneling and leather-bound books usually created an atmosphere of cultivated comfort, but tonight the space felt charged with tension. "You missed the entire gala," Carter said without preamble. "Janet had to explain your absence to the mayor, the symphony board, and every major donor in Boston." Victoria set her purse down carefully. "I sent my regrets and a substantial donation. My absence hardly constitutes a crisis." "It's not about the money, Victoria. It's about appearances, commitment, reliability." Carter's voice remained controlled, but she recognized the underlying anger. "The Prestons mentioned seeing you at a children's recital and an ice cream parlor with the Miller family." Victoria met his gaze directly. "Yes, Emily was performing a composition she wrote. It was important to her." More important than obligations you've maintained for a decade? More important than your position in this community?" Carter stood, pacing with uncharacteristic agitation. "Victoria, what's happening to you?" The question hung between them, sincere despite its accusatory tone. Carter genuinely didn't understand the transformation in his wife. "I'm discovering priorities I'd forgotten," she said finally, "or perhaps never truly had." Carter's expression softened slightly. "This is about Lily, isn't it? This Miller girl reminds you of what we lost." "Not exactly." Victoria moved to the window, looking out at the garden. "Emily isn't a replacement for Lily. She's herself, brilliant, determined, genuine in a way I haven't been in years." "And what does that mean for us?" Carter asked quietly. "For everything we've built together." Victoria turned back to him, suddenly aware of the vast distance between them despite standing in the same room. "I don't know," she admitted. "I only know I can't go back to who I was before." Carter studied her for a long moment. "There's something else. You've been avoiding my calls, disappearing for hours. What aren't you telling me?" Victoria hesitated. She had kept her medical scare private, handling the fear and subsequent relief alone as she handled all personal matters. "I had a mammogram last month," she said finally. "There was a shadow they needed to investigate further. Given my mother's history, they expedited the biopsy." Carter's face paled. "Cancer? Victoria, why didn't you tell me?" "The results were benign," she continued. "I received them the morning after I met Emily at the restaurant." The timing was significant. "You faced that alone," Carter said, the realization dawning in his eyes. "Just like you faced Lily's death alone, even though I was right beside you." Victoria hadn't expected this insight from Carter. "Yes," she acknowledged. "That's how I've handled everything, how we've handled everything. And now this child has somehow broken through that pattern." Victoria nodded. "She speaks truth without calculation, lives with joy despite circumstances that would embitter many adults, creates beauty from her pain." She paused, then added quietly, "Everything I stopped doing 7 years ago." Before Victoria could say more, her phone chimed with a text message. She glanced at the screen. The message was from Sarah. Emily had a bad fall, transferring from chair to bed. At Memorial ER now. She's asking for you. Victoria's heart seemed to stop momentarily. I have to go, she said, already moving toward the door. Emily's been injured. Carter didn't attempt to stop her. Do you want me to come with you? The offer surprised Victoria. Carter had maintained a polite distance from her involvement with the Millers. Yes, she said after a moment's hesitation. I would appreciate that. Autumn deepened into winter, bringing early snow that transformed Boston into a landscape of white frosted brownstones. 6 weeks after her fall, Emily had her cast removed and returned to her piano studies with renewed enthusiasm. The routine Victoria had established continued. Wednesday and Saturday afternoons at the Hamilton estate, now expanded to include occasional Sunday family dinners, where the Millers joined Victoria and Carter for meals that grew increasingly relaxed. Try that passage again, Victoria instructed, as Emily worked through a challenging Schumann piece. Less pedal this time. Emily's technique had advanced remarkably in the months since they began working together. Victoria had gradually shifted from merely offering her piano for practice to providing formal instruction. Better? Emily asked after replaying the section. Much. Victoria smiled. You're developing a fine sensitivity to pedaling, despite not being able to use the pedals yourself. Emily nodded thoughtfully. I hear it in my head, how it should sound, with proper pedaling. Then I adjust my touch to create the same effect. This ability to adapt, to find creative solutions to seemingly insurmountable obstacles, continually impressed Victoria. That's enough for today, Victoria said, glancing at the clock. Your parents will be here soon for dinner. Emily closed the piano and wheeled herself to the window overlooking the snow-covered garden. Mrs. Hamilton, can I ask you something personal? Victoria tensed slightly but nodded. Of course. The picture in the silver frame, the one you keep face down on the side table, is that your daughter? The question was unexpected yet inevitable. Emily noticed everything, and they had spent countless hours in this room where Lily's presence lingered. Victoria crossed to the table and picked up the frame, hesitating before turning it over to reveal a photograph of herself holding a newborn Lily, her face alight with joy. Yes, she said simply. Her name was Lily. Emily wheeled closer, studying the photograph with gentle curiosity. She was beautiful. When did she die? The directness of the question might have seemed cruel coming from anyone else, but Emily's straightforward approach to difficult truths had become familiar to Victoria. Before she had a chance to live, Victoria replied. She was stillborn at 7 months. Emily nodded solemnly. That's why you stopped playing piano. It wasn't a question, but an observation, one that connected dots Victoria had never explicitly explained. Yes, but you're playing again now, Emily pointed out, and teaching me. Victoria set the photograph back on the table, this time leaving it facing upward. Yes. Emily seemed to understand that Victoria couldn't yet articulate the transformation that had occurred. Instead of pressing for explanations, she changed the subject. Mom said you're coming to my doctor's appointment next week, the one with the specialist from Johns Hopkins. Victoria nodded. The stem cell therapy trial, Dr. Peterson had mentioned months earlier, had advanced, and Emily had been accepted as a candidate. Victoria had arranged for the leading researcher to visit Boston to evaluate Emily personally. Dr. Mehta is one of the foremost experts in spinal cord regeneration, Victoria explained. He's developed a new approach that shows promise for injuries like yours. Emily's expression grew serious. Dad's worried about it. I heard him telling Mum it's too experimental. Victoria chose her words carefully. New treatments always involve uncertainty. That's why we're having this consultation, so your parents can make an informed decision. What if it doesn't work? Emily asked, voicing the fear adults often tried to shield her from. What if I get my hopes up and nothing changes? Victoria moved to kneel beside Emily's wheelchair, meeting her at eye level. Science advances through brave people willing to try new approaches, even when success isn't guaranteed. Like composition, sometimes you write something that doesn't quite work, but the attempt teaches you something valuable for next time. Emily considered this analogy. So even if it doesn't help me walk, it might help the doctors learn things that could help other kids later? Exactly. Emily nodded, decision made with the clarity only children can achieve. Then I want to try it, even if it's scary. A day, 3 months after beginning the experimental stem cell treatment, Emily Miller sat at the Steinway grand piano in the Hamilton Music Room, her legs supported by innovative braces that allowed her to reach the pedals for the first time. The custom-designed supports, another Hamilton Foundation project, enabled her to press the damper pedal with minimal leg movement. "Try it again," Victoria encouraged, standing nearby. "Use the pedal on the resolution of the phrase, then release." Emily pressed gently with her right foot, her face lighting up as the harmonics blended exactly as she had imagined them. "It works! It really works!" The milestone wasn't just musical. 2 weeks earlier, Emily had taken her first unassisted steps during physical therapy. Just 3 wobbly steps between parallel bars, but steps nonetheless. The experimental treatment, combined with intensive therapy, had yielded cautiously promising results. Today, however, wasn't about medical progress, but musical celebration. In an hour, guests would arrive for a special recital in the Hamilton home. Emily's debut as both performer and composer, in a setting more formal than the community music school, but more intimate than a concert hall. "Are you nervous?" Victoria asked, as Emily continued practicing. The child considered the question seriously. "A little, but the good kind of nervous, like butterflies, that help you fly instead of just making you feel sick." Victoria smiled at the apt description. "I used to feel that way before performances. It's energy you can channel into the music." An hour later, the music room was filled with attentive guests. Carter stood at the front, welcoming everyone with a warmth that still occasionally surprised Victoria. "Today's recital represents something special," Carter was saying. "Not just remarkable talent, but remarkable courage. Emily Miller has shown us what it means to pursue beauty despite obstacles, and in doing so has taught us all something about resilience." His gaze found Victoria, and the private smile they shared acknowledged how much had changed between them as well. Their marriage had found new footing in recent months, not the strategic partnership it had once been, but something with genuine roots. Emily performed brilliantly, her program showcasing both classical interpretations and 2 original compositions. The audience responded with genuine appreciation rather than polite applause. After the planned program concluded, Victoria moved to the piano. "We have one final piece," she announced, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "A duet Emily and I have arranged together, combining elements of Debussy's Clair de Lune with original material." As Victoria settled beside Emily on the extended bench, the room fell silent with anticipation. "Ready?" Victoria whispered. Emily nodded, her eyes bright with excitement. Together they began to play, Victoria handling the bass foundation while Emily carried the melody, gradually transforming it into something new, yet connected to its origins. The piece evolved as they played, incorporating elements that spoke of challenge and persistence, interwoven with acknowledgement of loss while embracing renewed hope. Victoria found herself transported, not by technical perfection, but by the pure joy of collaborative creation. This was why she had loved music originally, not for accolades, but for its ability to express what words could not. As they played the final measures, Victoria realized she was crying, silent tears tracking down her cheeks, even as her hands continued their dance across the keys. They were tears of release, of letting go of the woman she had become in the wake of loss and embracing who she might yet be. The final notes hung in the air, resonating through the room Victoria had designed for a daughter who never played there. Instead, another child had brought music back to this space, and to Victoria herself. Later, as guests mingled over refreshments, Victoria found herself beside Sarah, watching Emily demonstrate her new leg braces to an impressed Dr. Peterson. "Thank you," Sarah said quietly. Victoria turned to her, questioning, "For the recital?" Sarah shook her head. "For seeing her, not just her condition or her talent, but her, the whole person." The simple acknowledgement touched Victoria deeply. "She saw me first," she admitted. "That day in the restaurant, when everyone else saw Mrs. Hamilton, she somehow saw Victoria." Sarah nodded, understanding. "Children have that gift sometimes, seeing past the facades adults construct." "She changed everything," Victoria said softly. "My perspective, my priorities, my understanding of what matters." As the afternoon continued, Victoria found herself reflecting on the journey that had begun with a chance encounter in a restaurant. A moment when an 8-year-old's courage had cracked open the careful facade she had constructed around her grief. Emily Miller had not replaced Lily in Victoria's heart. Nothing could do that. But she had helped Victoria rediscover parts of herself long buried. Her music, her capacity for joy, her ability to connect without calculation or control. And in doing so, she had given Victoria the most unexpected gift of all, the courage to live fully again.